in terms of what we as individuals can do to impact women in a positive way. However, I've got a couple of points. I think that it was partially raised today. I know that in the Toronto Star, we've had a series of articles that have spoken about the erosion of women's rights. A lot of women think that things have actually improved, but according to this article, they've cut back on childcare, they've cut back on the wage gap is getting bigger. The advocacy groups they've stopped funding them, so the larger sort of issues aren't being addressed and whatnot. Any of our panelists today, if you had some advice to give to our federal government, what would be the one major or one or two major initiatives that you would say to them that they need to address the situation of women's equality in Canada?
Does not pay for childcare for any child anywhere. And it doesn't matter how often that's considered a question of choice, it's not a reality about the economic cost of raising children. And the second thing I would say, healthy democracies have advocacy that's funded, and healthy democracies challenge issues of the citizens that are living in communities and engage the citizens in bringing forward solutions. So the loss of research and advocacy funding for women and girls is very serious. If you can't have research that actually says $100 a month is inadequate for raising a child in Canada, or you can't have a group research what it actually means to write a piece of legislation on the division of property at the end of a marriage, then you have half of the citizens in the country not having their equality rights actionable. It's fine to have a charter that has equality rights, it's important, but it's how you actually live them. And the last thing I would say, I know you said two, but I'd say one more, the loss of court challenge funding was a big loss for women and other equity-seeking groups. If you wanted to go to court to have a legal interpretation of your rights and challenge legislation that you felt was not supporting women, funding was provided to enable you to do that. Women can't afford huge court challenges, they're expensive, so the loss of that was significant, and I think most people would say should be replenished.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Structure. We fundraise now for advocacy because, as mentioned, it is an essential part of our community and ensuring that people have a voice and change in policy and law. And it is, unfortunately, it's a costly process and research and paper writing and ensuring that you have the right information. The legal system is very complicated, and it's an essential part of all of our structure and ensuring that voice and that change is occurring.
Thank you. Now, in Kenya, the women over there make up approximately 80% of the farmers, but they also went on to say that very few of them have actual control over their land. How would one address these kinds of things?
Us, we go over to visit, and we hear the stories, and we know how much difference it really makes and how much of a voice the women get, and that makes change. When you it just comes back to that. It's not going to answer everything. Fair trade cannot be the answer to everything, but it can be a model, and it can make big changes because it grows, and it's actually the thing that empowers the women and gives them the voice. So from my standpoint, it really does make a difference. Just to do that, it gives women a voice.
We have our programs in Africa are in urban centers, and one of the big challenges young people have in urban centers is that they've moved from rural areas to find jobs or to find housing, or because they feel the opportunities are better in an urban area. And in fact, it's not the case. The challenges for finding jobs, the challenges for finding appropriate housing, safety, family connections are often lost when young people are moving from rural areas. So any opportunity to encourage youth to stay in rural areas and to stay in more traditional farming or agricultural practices, or having vocations that can be done in a rural area, does prevent the migration into urban centres, which makes vulnerable youth often more vulnerable in that situation.
For that, but it is key that women have access to those, not just the land, but the resources necessary to work outside of the home or near the home. In a lot of the contexts where we're working, the men are involved in migrant labor, so actually, although they might have the deed to the land, the women are in charge of looking after it and staying at home and looking after the kids, and then the men might send some remittances at some point. So.
Thank you. And so to speak a little bit more about men's role in promoting and protecting the human rights, the equality, the advancement of women, what else can men be doing, whether in Canada or internationally? Any questions?
Like I said, one of the programs that we've had is the development of youth groups specifically for young men to address issues of gender in their communities. And I think that's been quite successful because a lot of the time gender-related development programs focus exclusively on women. And the small youth groups that we've developed have given young men an opportunity to discuss issues of gender, how it impacts them, their cultural understanding of gender, and an opportunity to engage with some issues that in the past have been exclusively focused on women. So I think that's one very small way that YCI has been doing that in the communities where we work.
Even today, when I was approached about this event originally, there was some discussion about whether it would be better to send a woman from our organization or about myself to come. And I think that it is an issue, women's empowerment. Obviously, it's great to have women leaders, but men have to step up and take a role and be engaged as well. So all the activities that we heard about that you can take part and take action, men need to take action on those things just as much as women.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think part of it is engaging young men at an early age in development in their life, and that's something that we run the Week Without Violence every October. And several years ago, we developed a program so that there were panel discussions, there were workshops that engaged both the women, the girls, and the boys in the working with the Elementary Teachers Federation of Toronto, working with them and ensuring that there were programs specifically just for the boys, but also with interactive programming with both the boys and girls together. So ensuring that we're addressing issues that just the boys need to be in a comfortable environment to discuss, but also in a space to be able to interact with both boys and girls.
One of the things that happens when we have our Shelter from the Storm campaign every year is that people phone in with donations, and I often sign up to take a shift, usually in the evening, and I'm always overwhelmed by the number of men who call to give money because they are afraid for their daughters, for their neighbors, for their sisters, for their mothers. So on a very simple level, men who have more access to wealth than women do can financially support the work that needs to be done on women's issues. And they can do the kind of things we're talking about, programs for boys and teens at young ages. But I think in the area of human trafficking, in the trafficking of women and girls, men really have to step up, because if there was no market for men wanting young girls, trafficking Aboriginal women across the country at very young ages, buying and selling women, then we wouldn't have the trafficking problem that we have in the country. So at some point, the way that women have stepped on these issues and men supporting women have stepped up on these issues here in Canada and around the world, if men really want to influence how to save girls and young women in the field of trafficking, they have to step up and be as involved as we are in public education campaigns to stop the trafficking of girls and women.